computer.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name is Brent Lopez. I am an indie bookseller and the manager of Children's Book World in Los Angeles, where we celebrate diversity, knowledge, enrichment. We're a world where every child sees themselves and each other on our bookshelves. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for a very special book talk with 2023 Judy Lopez Award winner Lisa Yee. Yay! And 2023 Judy Lopez Award honorees Celia C. Perez, Skylar Schremp, and Kwame Alexander. We are waiting for Kwame. As soon as anybody sees him go active, hit it in chat, give us a shout out, let us know, and we're going to bring him right up on stage as soon as we see him. So, and we wanted to get started so everyone could see everything, but we will add him in as soon as he arrives. So, but let's get started. The Judy Lopez Award for Children's Literature is a national award given every year to call attention to fine literature for children ages 9 through 12. The awards honor Judy Lopez, a founding member of the Los Angeles chapter of the Women's National Book Association. And the mission of this award is to celebrate excellence in children's literature and to champion authors who write for middle grade readers. I happen to think middle grade fiction is the bomb. Like it is the space you want to be in. You absolutely have the greatest fans if you're writing middle grade fiction, because those middle grade fiction fans, they love reading and they love books. Lisa Yee has been writing classic middle grade fiction for 20 years, including Millicent Men, Girl Genius, Stanford Wong Flunk's Big Time, and many more. Her 2022 novel, Maisie Chen's Last Chance, won the Asian American Pacific Literature Award for Best Book. The Newbery Honor was a National Book Award finalist and is the 2023 winner of the Judy Lopez Award. Kwame Alexander is a poet, educator, publisher, and the New York Times bestselling author of 35 books, including the Newbery Medal-winning middle grade novel, The Crossover. His acclaimed 2022 novel and verse, The Door of No Return, is a recipient of the 2023 Judy Lopez Award honor. Celia C. Perez is the acclaimed middle grade author of 2018 Pura Beltre author honor book, The First Rule of Punk, one of my favorite books of all time, Strange Birds, and the recipient of the 2023 Judy Lopez Award honor, Tumble. Skylar Schremp's debut middle grade novel, Three Strike Summer, has garnered multiple multi-starred reviews and is a recipient of the 2023 Judy Lopez honor. This book just blew me away too, Skylar. This was just really amazing, and I can't wait to talk to you about it. I'm keeping an eye out, as we don't see Kwame yet, but we will keep looking. Hey, everybody. How are you all today?
Good.
Well, happy to be here.
So let's just talk first about the joy of writing middle grade fiction. We'll start with you, Lisa. What is it about middle grade that just makes it like the sweet spot?
Well, for me, it's like, you know how when people say, they ask you a question about your childhood, the year I always go back to when I think of my childhood is when I was around 10 years old. Because when I was in, middle grade, I thought I know everything and it doesn't get any better than this. And I don't know if I think that's still true. But for me, like writing for middle grade, it's just such an exciting time because your mind is open, things are happening. It's just, see, now I'm just babbling. But anyway.
No, you're not.
But writing for middle grade, it's, I think middle graders have a particular view of the world and they're open to things. And that's what I love about it.
We have Kwame coming right up on stage. So I'm going to go, while he's coming up, we may interrupt you, one of you, but Celia, do you want to talk about writing for middle grade?
Yeah, I love middle grade. It's my favorite thing to read. And Lisa mentioned when thinking back to her own childhood. And I always, when I think of like my fondest memories of reading, it's always those ages of 10, like 9, 10 to 12. So, hey, Kwame. So for me, it just feels like a very just easy audience to write for. It feels like you said, like a sweet spot, because it's there are these ages that are in this in between place, and I love that in between nature of middle grade. They're, like Lisa said, they're still innocent and open minded and open to things, and hopeful. They believe that they can really make changes in the world. But they're also maturing and realizing that, the world isn't black and white, and the good guy doesn't always win. And so they're kind of grappling with these really conflicted ways of being and experiencing the world. And I just really, I enjoy writing for that audience.
Yeah, it is such a great audience. Welcome, Kwame. It is so good to see you. We're so excited you're here.
Hey, I'm so excited I'm here. And so I was having some technical difficulties, and at the same time, my dad's calling me. He's like, I'm watching and you're not on there. You're supposed to be there to get your award. What are you doing? So I'm here. Thank you for your patience. It's so great to see you, Lisa, Skylar, Celia. Wow, this is an honor.
Kwame, we all met your dad.
We met your dad. We brought him on in the green room because we thought you were using an alias. So we were like, oh, this must be him, Dr. E. Curtis Alexander. But your father is great. He was so friendly and nice. So we had a pleasure. We all got to meet him.
That's classic. That's classic.
So we're talking about the joy of writing middle grade fiction. Like these are the fans that like you really get like a visceral reaction from them when you've written a book for them, when they see themselves on your pages. Could you talk about that, Kwame? What is that? Why is middle grade such a perfect spot for writing books for kids?
Well, I try to write books that I would have wanted to have read when I was 11 and 12 years old. And so I want books where like a boy could be sensitive, like a boy could have a crush and it be okay to talk about it, and not, I was the kid who had the crush and called the girl and had written out everything I was gonna say. Because I didn't know, I knew I was gonna freak out or get too nervous. And like, I just feel like if we want to create and nurture and develop men who are beautiful and kind and loving and compassionate, then it has to start as children, right?
Yeah.
And so when I'm writing, that's what I have in mind. So when I meet a kid, in particular, like a boy like I was, like I met this kid named Shunwell. He was in the 7th grade at a middle school in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. He'd never read a book. And his librarian brought me a letter that he had written to me. She brought it to me at the Chapel Hill Public Library. The next day, I was so moved by the letter where he talked about how he'd never read a book that I showed up at his school. The teacher brings him out of the classroom. I don't introduce myself. He doesn't know who I am. I just start reciting a poem from the crossover. He starts joining in because he knows the book because he's read it so much. So we're going back and forth. And he's into it. He's excited. And after it's over, I'm like, thanks. He's like, thanks. And he's going back to his class. And I say, oh, by the way, I'm Kwame Alexander. And he goes, and he starts running up and down the hallway screaming, Kwame Alexander's here, Kwame Alexander's here. And he's just so excited. And I think that's the thing we want. We want kids to not just read a book, we want kids to want to read. We want to help them figure out how to really develop an appreciation for literature. And how do we do that? And I think we do it by, being brilliant, like Lisa and Celia, and Jackie and Jason and Dan and Jared and Skylar and everybody. Like we do it by doing what we do. Yeah. Helping, understanding that the mind of an adult begins in the imagination of a child. And I think it's incredible. Middle school is the place to really help develop that imagination.
And for every feeling that you give to those kids when they, like you going to meet that young man and the experience that he had with that, but they don't understand what they give back to all of you as authors when they memorize your poem or memorize your story or make their own version of your story or spin-offs or whatever else they're going to be doing. I think it's always so interesting the relationship authors have with their fans. Skylar, this is your debut novel.
Yeah.
Middle grade, was this just where you wanted to be? You just knew it wasn't going to be YA, it wasn't going to be picture book. Why was this your first book?
I don't know, because it was. I don't know. I kind of came into a writing life thinking I was going to write YA, and sort of spent, a couple months living in a very moody, weighty historical fiction kind of place. And then Gloria just kind of popped up out of nowhere. And there was just something about her that I really wanted to stay with. And, I was in grad school at the time, so people in my writing groups and my teachers were really drawn to her. And it's kind of like, there felt like there was a lot of momentum behind her. So she was a total surprise. I didn't ever envision myself writing middle grade fiction. I really thought I was going to write, moody teenage stuff. And I'm writing that now, and it feels very different. And I'm like very weighty, and like the world is on my shoulders a bit when I'm writing. But just to speak to the points everyone else has brought up, I think there is something wonderful about this age group because they still play. Like there's a sense of playfulness and real kiddishness that I think a lot of people lose when they do become teenagers, when they do get a little older, and there's that self-consciousness. But there's that real sense of play that's so wonderful that I think is, then there's a lot of that in my book, obviously, because it's all about baseball and trying to make time to play when there really is none. But they also are sort of starting to understand the rules of the world and starting to see that their parents are adult people with lives, and starting to understand that there are real systems at work, and starting to really come into an awareness in a way that you're not as much when you're younger than that. So I really enjoyed writing middle grade fiction. I'm hoping that once I finish my moody YA period, which I think by the end of the year I'll be done, I'm excited to go back to middle grade and kind of experience that again. But I don't have much to compare to the other people on this chat. So
I've been selling books for 30 plus years, and as an indie bookseller, and I always think of middle grade fiction as being the most comparable to adult literary fiction. The subjects that are dealt with in middle grade fiction and standalone novels, they just go into a deeper understanding of the humans, of who we are as human beings, and the natural ways that we respond with our families, with our community, trying to find ourselves and our place in the world. It feels so much like adult fiction. I wish more adults read middle grade fiction because I really think they're missing out on that opportunity. But children's book authors in community with educators, librarians, and indie booksellers are perennially on the front line battle of creating literary space for young people to explore who they are and the roots of their existence. The four of you with your remarkable novels all take on subjects that are currently under fire politically as unteachable topics for kids in this particular country right now. Lisa, with the history of many Chinese Americans who helped to build industrial and modern US but faced exclusionary acts of racism and prejudice when trying to forge their pathway as citizens, you tell an incredible story about a contemporary girl, Maisie Chen, but you were able to tell so much about the roots of who she is from going back 150 years to the roots of that. Kwame, with your trilogy opener, you lay bare the scourge of enslavement and its despicable legacy that affects the souls of everyone who has come after that. Whether they realize it or not, it affects everybody. And you tell it through the story, this one amazing young man, Kofi. It's an incredible story. Celia, your story of found family and lost family has this incredible character, the wonderful uncle, who is not only a hard-fighting luchador, but is also a wonderful desert town drag queen battling for their own existence. And we know right now, having drag queens in stories is not necessarily the safest thing either. And Skylar, your devastating debut, a depiction of the Depression era poverty, but also I really love that you put in information about 20th century labor rights and union, which I think is really, really important All of these things are, like I said, under fire right now. We'll start with Lisa and then just go back through the four of you. Why is it important to be able to continue to write about these topics and telling these individual stories within these books?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it is so important, and I think the thing is that what we're writing about is it's not just history, but it's family, it's reality. We're not I mean, some of the stuff, yes, we're making up because it's fiction, but we're also telling the story of real people and what has gone on, and we are writing the truth. I mean, we're writing about things that are actually happened or things that have happened, and it's a way, I think, to open conversations. It's a way to get people talking, and it's a way to get kids to start asking questions.
Kwame?
I mean, ditto. Like she summed it up. That's the thing. I would just beg to differ with the book that I've written, The Door No Return. I'm actually writing book 2 now. It's due on Tuesday. Y'all writers know how that is. I'm on deadline, and I got to turn this book in. So when I leave here, I'm going back to write. But it's not about enslavement. There's a lot of novels. There's a lot of picture books. There's a lot of valuable literature that's been written about enslavement. I had no interest in writing that story again. I wanted to write a book about a boy who has a crush on a girl.
Yeah.
Who has a cousin who's a bully who likes the same girl. Whose cousin beats him at everything, at racing and wrestling, but he's good at one thing, he's good at swimming. I wanted to write a book about him challenging his cousin to a swim-off so he can win the heart of the girl and win his pride back. I wanted to write a book about him going to the river every day to practice swimming and going to the river the night before the big swim-off, even though he's been told to stay out of the water at night because the river is cursed under the moon. I wanted to write a book about a boy in 1860, Ghana, West Africa, known then as the Gold Coast, who laughs, plays, does homework, reads, gets pissed off because his older brother eats all the stew, listens to his wise grandpa speak in Proverbs, just has a regular life. And then on page 303, everything changes. Mm-hmm. He comes face to face with the door, no return. But the story was about the stuff that we don't ever hear about. I was trying to change the narrative of what we know about Africa and what we know about Black history and what we know about Black people, so that I could broaden our imaginations when it comes to appreciating, respecting the humanity of all of us, in particular of Black Americans. I don't know if I answered the question, but because again, Lisa did it.
Yeah. No, you did. I mean, I don't want a different take. It's not necessarily, or not even a different take. I just want your own personal take on it. And I think you did. And with all respect, that is absolutely right. I mean, that's what makes that book so magical too, is that it is, you talked before about wanting to be able to connect to that particular young person today. And you wrote a story that shows that when you're reading historical fiction or reading about a character in a different time or place, that a young person at 13 or 11 or 12 is very much in tune with the same sort of feelings that a young person of 11, 12, 13 may be today. And so it gives them a connection to that story. And no matter what happens in that character's life, that it connects them in some way that they're going to then be bonded with that character no matter what they go through. And I appreciate your laying out the way you did about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, and thank you for those kind words and that thoughtful sort of perspective. To go back quickly to something Lisa said, she talked about how we write about family. We're writing about history, but we're writing about family. We're writing through the lens of the familial. And I've been thinking a lot about this idea of what does it mean to be a parent? What does it mean to be a child? And as a child, you come to know, it just becomes the modus operandi of your family that there is protection, that your family's always going to, your mother and father are always going to be there. You're going to have a meal. You're going to have this protection, this unconditional love. And so what happens to a child when they can't trust that, when that's not there, when that's taken away from them? And so I think a lot of times when we think about this idea, you brought up enslavement, we don't look at it through the eyes of a kid, of the children who lost that trust, or rather who had that trust stolen away from them. I can't imagine what it would be like if my kid, I have a 15-year-old daughter who's mad at me right now because I'm traveling tomorrow, I'm gone. And she's mad because I'm leaving. And she's always been, and my dad says, y'all met my dad. My dad says I'm getting it back because I used to be upset with him. But my 15-year-old kid, I can't imagine what it would be like if she thought that every time she got upset or did something wrong, there was a possibility that I did not love her in the same way that I always have, in the way that she would expect me to be. That happened to generations of African children. They lost that. What does that do to a child? What does that do to a family over generations? Again, I'm on a soapbox. I'm testifying. I don't know. You opening up something, but I ain't answering the questions. But I'm feeling it.
That's what this is about. Celia, when we talk about families, I think that's like the central core of Tumble, right? The idea of she's, for Adele, she's really in a good family. She's got a good stepdad, and then she finds out that she has this whole other family that she didn't really know about, that's been kept from her. And then she gets to meet them, and she realizes that they're not all that she thought imagined in her head. But can you talk about that? And also, I would like you to talk about her uncle. I'm sorry, I don't have his name in my hands right now, but
Mateo.
Mateo, yes, Uncle Mateo.
Yeah. So it was a story about family from the beginning, and I think part of it came from my own experience with family, and specifically with reading a lot of books for kids that had protagonists who were Latinos, and there was always this sort of like kind of stereotype of what Latino families were like. There's always the big extended family with the grandmother at home and the uncles and the aunts and the cousins, and I did not have that experience. My parents didn't have relationships with their siblings, so we didn't know our cousins. I didn't know my grandparents, and so I just kind of wondered what it would be like to be a kid who had that just sort of disconnection from her biological family, from her blood family, and what it would be like for her to not have that, and then to find it and have that experience of kind of asking questions about what it means to not have them and what it means to have them, what kind of role they play in her life. But going back to the uncle, the character of the uncle, and the question you had asked originally about writing books about topics that are getting a lot of heat these days. I wasn't thinking of the uncle as, I'm going to put this character in here because I know it's going to be, it's the thing that everyone's talking about and people are going to get worked up about, and I'm just going to put it in your face. He just kind of naturally became part of the story, and I think one of the reasons why I write the books I write is going to what Kwame said, and he didn't use the word normalize, but trying to normalize the presence of Latinos in children's books in a way that is not what you are used to reading or or assuming you're going to read. Like in the first rule of punk and in Tumble, the character, the protagonist is Latina, but that is not that's not the story. That's not all there is to her. She's also this kid who's grappling with family issues. They're kids who are figuring out their place in the world. They're dealing with identity issues. They're dealing with issues that any kid, regardless of race or nationality or background, experiences. And so I think I'm just always trying to write stories that are reflective of the world that I live in and the world that I see and the world that I lived in as a kid that I didn't ever experience in books. So that I think that character, like all of the other characters, kind of came from that desire to write those stories.
And you do a beautiful job of it. I just want to say, I mean, as a Latino reader, what I love, when I said I love the first Rule of Punk so much, it's because there were 100 characters and they were all different versions of being Mexican characters inside the story. And I just thought, I was like, oh, they're all Mexican. There's not just like the Mexican family. They're all Mexican and they're all different. Some of them are little snooty mean girls and some of them are you know, they're just different. And I just loved it that everybody was different. And I think that is the thing about it. We go back to it, talking about middle grade and why this award exists, is because for a lot of us, we read all sorts of books for 40 years of our growing up life as a child. And we read those books, whether they were about us or they showed who we were in our own personal lives. And we actually enjoyed those books. They made us readers. There is nothing wrong with readers today who may not be Latino or may not be African American or may not be Asian American, reading books, talking about a normal story, just like you're all writing about, like any other story that we read when we were a kid. It just happens to be a different, you know, family name or different practices or cultural foods or whatever it may be. You can read those books and survive. And not only survive, you're going to love those books just the way all of us did. And I just love that you write your stories. Yeah, absolutely. I don't mean to say that you're trying to set things up for, like, we're not the ones who are doing the going, you know, crazy with the banning and everything else like that. We're just writing the stories. But because you write these stories that are so powerful, so impactful on teaching empathy and kindness to young people, that makes them dangerous. Whether you intend them to be dangerous or not, that's what makes them dangerous to other people, because they don't want kindness or empathy. They see those things as negative terms. Skylar, I have to tell you my connection to your story. My grandmother and grandfather were from the Oklahoma Panhandle. They They went to California in 1936 in one truck. They had 9 girls, and they went to a California work camp and was in a labor camp They were fruit pickers. This is my maternal family. So this is your story in this particular book, was the story of my own family. So I would love to hear about why you chose the story, and also about labor, which I thought was, like, it was so interesting to read about labor in this book.
Well, the funny thing is, like, I started this book when no one was talking about labor. And by the time the book came out, everybody was talking about labor, and yay, WGA and the writers that got their deal. So hooray. But it's been really fascinating to see labor kind of be an issue that people are now connecting with the book, because I wasn't thinking about that. I didn't know that would be a resonant, issue when the book came out. But in terms of, like, why I picked this story, I'm terrible at answering these questions, because I kind of think of stories a bit like radio waves, and your author brain is just kind of turning the dial and, like, being like, oh, that I'm hearing something. Oh no, I got a full signal there. And so it's almost like there's just something out there that you're trying to catch. I didn't sit down and go, oh, I really want to write a Dust Bowl book. I really want to write about, labor exploitation and baseball. I am not a sports person at all. Like, I had panic attacks being like, I'm not going to be able to write a baseball scene, and I'm going to fail, and all the baseball players reading this are going to go, she's full of baloney. But for me, I really kind of, like, listen to stories and then see where they take me, which means it takes me forever to write and to produce a full novel, because it's a lot of just exploring and listening and going down research rabbit holes. And, when I first started this book, I hadn't done a lot of research. And so the family lived in this little cabin and they had a garden and they had dinner together every night, which is just so far from reality that I'm embarrassed to even, say that out loud. It's pretty far from reality from, people that pick our food today. It's still very hard. It's still not fair. But yeah, I think I'm glad you brought up the stuff about book banning, because I think that it's something we all very much need to be thinking about. I have not had the kind of response to my book as some other authors have gotten a response to their book. My protagonist is white, and that probably has a lot to do with it. And socialism is not scary right now for some reason. Drag queens are. So, maybe in 6 months, the tide will turn again and there'll be some new boogeyman that everyone's shouting about. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I just want to also just piggyback really fast on what Kwame was saying about, at the first and foremost, writing the child, their wants, what they want to do, what's exciting, the games they're playing, all of that. And there are these big historical things that are happening around the characters we write that are happening to us right now, right? But we don't, sit in our kitchen going, I'm in the middle of this historical moment. Like, we're thinking about what I need to get for dinner. Like, when is my daughter going to wake up from her nap? And history kind of is happening in the background in a lot of ways, kind of, bleeding in, and sometimes it hits us over the head with, a mallet sometimes. But I think, like, for me, the best books, the books I really like to read, do have those really, really intense, beautiful, big issues, but they're so centered on, like, children, child's joy, child's wants, child's whatever, children that aren't defined by the worst thing that happened to them, but may have to navigate some pretty difficult stuff, but ultimately are, have their own humanity that is uniquely themselves. And, yeah. So I don't know if I answered your question either, but there you go.
I don't think you answered my question, but you moved right into exactly where I was going to go next, which was to just talk about the joyfulness of all of the books in terms of the characters that you wrote. Because when you think again about classic middle grade, there is that character that you fall in love with. If it's Millicent Min, if it's Harriet the Spy, whatever it may be, there's that character that you write. And you want to go through the whole book with them. You almost want to role model that character in some ways. And I want to know about how each of you finds that character. What is it is there a process that you go through to find that central character? And how do you create them from the ground up to make them who they end up on the written page? And so we've got Maisie Chen, and all of her exuberance, which is great. Kofi, who is just an amazing character. Addie, and Gloria. So I'd like each of you just to talk about that primary character and how they came to be in existence.
Somebody else can go first this time.
Oh, that's a hard one. Addie, I always kind of think about the fact that they're the pantsers and the outliners in writing. They're the authors who, maybe there's something else, the third category, but they're the writers who outline and kind of know what's happening from beginning to end, and the pantsers who are flying by the seat of their pants. And I feel I'm definitely a pantser. I'm flying by the seat of my pants, and I start to build around some elements that I want to write a story about, and then the character sort of comes from there, and I follow it, and I don't quite know who this person is going to be or exactly what they're going to want, but I'm just kind of following along with this person until they become who they are, which is kind of a weird way to describe the process. I don't know if anyone has a better way of describing it. But a lot of times, and this goes back to the question about why middle grade, I feel that there is always a part of me, something that I needed or wanted as a child that I didn't have, that is at least a kernel of what the protagonist becomes. And so so I think Addie probably started with 12-year-old me and then kind of grew into her own story.
So
oh, go ahead, Kwame. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, Skylar.
Okay, I'll make it short. I feel Celia on this a lot in terms of being a pantser. Although I heard George R.R. Martin describe it as architects and gardeners, and like gardeners just sort of see what grows. And I always try to view that because I feel like pantsers makes us sound like we don't know what we're doing sometimes. Yeah, I mean, it really, again, like going back to that radio signal idea, it's very much like, who's out there. But I do feel like in terms of Gloria, like there's a lot of me in that. I was that kid, I feel like, that often spoke out of turn for better or worse. Kind of still am that person where, 1 out of every 10 things I say is incredibly stupid and hurtful, and I have to backtrack and solve it and make amends for it. And the other 9 are like really important things that I feel like need to be out in the world. And so there's a lot of, Gloria kind of finding that balance between kind of, just blah over everybody and really kind of tailoring and honing her voice and really, using it as a tool for something. But yeah, I mean, it was just, in the Pantser Gardener thing, I mean, building Gloria, it was just a lot of play. I mean, I don't know about everybody else. There's, probably 200 pages that were on the chopping block of scenes that didn't make it in the book where, there was a scene where Gloria went to the movies, which was ridiculous. There was no way like a migrant fruit picker would have had time or cash to go to the movies, but I have this scene, so I like to just overwrite and discover a lot about the character and then strip all that away. So, and now I'm turning it over to Kwame because we both spoke at this.
Thanks, God. So I moved back from London last year, and I was living there during COVID, and I got a letter in the mail, and it was from a 5th grader in Santa Monica, and she wrote like 4 paragraphs on how much she loves my books and how she's read them, and she passes them around amongst her friends, and it was just like great. Like, he just did wonders for my ego. I was like, yeah, I'm the guy. I'm a dude. And then in the last paragraph, she said, however, when are you going to write a book with a female character? It's way past time for you to do that. And then she said, if this letter goes to Kwame's agent or publicist, do not read it. Please give this letter to him. He needs to act on this. So I flew from London to LA and surprised her at her school. And she and her classmates were all excited. Oh my! So obviously that's my thing. I love surprising kids.
I know.
yeah, that's my thing. And so they're all excited. I get in their classroom, they're just happy. And like 5 minutes later, she's like, so she changed her whole attitude. So when are you going to write a book with a female character? Did you hear me? So that was like my cue and my like directive. Okay, so my next book, I'm going to figure out how to have a female character as the lead. So I did. And I've been in love with the name Charlie forever. I really want to have a character named Charlie. So those 2 things happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, maybe her name's Charlene. And I love writing sports books, Skylar. I love it. And I know nothing about baseball, but I love the idea. I love the idea of her being a pitcher. And so she's a pitcher. So I guess my point is, I'm a gardener. I just water it and see what grows.
Mm-hmm.
And the character and it's poetry. Like, I'm writing novels in verse. So I don't have the luxury of having a whole bunch of words. I got to give you the character in 10 lines or less, or 20 lines or less. It's got to be memorable. And it's got to make you want to turn the page and keep reading it. And it's got to employ all the. So I'm watering it. And seeing what happens, and hopefully, if I just have my butt in the chair long enough, it'll work out.
I'm going to come right back to you with a question about writing in verse because that's something I wanted to talk to you about. But Lisa, I'm going to flip the question just a little bit for you. So, you've written a lot of books, but this is interesting with what Kwame is saying in terms of this young woman wanted to see herself in one of your stories, and I'm wondering if you have ever been writing and a character that you was not the primary character ended up demanding more space inside your book. The character, as you're writing it, you're like, oh, wait, I think this character actually might become the central character or have a bigger say in the story.
That absolutely happened with Maisie Chan's Last Chance, because the story is kind of a parallel story. It's historical, but it's her great-great-grandfather, and, you know, over 150 years ago, and then it's Maisie now, and actually Lucky, who's the great-great-grandfather, started taking over the entire book. And I had to really pull him back because I realized, no, this is called Maisie Chan's Last Chance, not Lucky Chan's journey from China to America. So I had to pull it back, but that happens to me a lot where some of the, the sub-characters will rise to the top and they'll be really loud and they'll want to take over the story. And then I have to remind myself to center the book and who's this book about. And like for writing about Maisie, she was like a smarter, braver, brighter version of me when I was a kid. I think, I do that a lot. I pull from my own childhood and then I think, okay, if things were different, what would I have done? But what I do, we're talking about, what is it? Pantsers, and what was the other thing? Architects? What's
gardeners, architects, pantsers, plotters, outliners.
Okay. So I actually outline. I outline a lot. And then I throw it away and I change everything. But I always have a beginning, middle, and an end, and I always write my endings first. And I'm on book number 20, novel number 23 right now. And the endings have never changed. Everything else has changed, but it gives me a goal, and the character is going toward that goal. So for Maisie, I knew how it was going to end, but I had to write about her journey and who she was in the beginning of the story so that we could see the changes that she makes. And then I wanted to say something to Kwame. You know how he's talking about how he likes to surprise people? So one time I was sitting at Taco Bell and I get a phone call and it's Kwame. And he says, I'm at a school and I'm with a girl and she's reading one of your books right now. And I was wondering, do you have a couple minutes so I could put her on the phone and surprise her and she could talk to you? And it was like, I had the best time. It was so.
Sorry about that. My bad. I do that a lot.
That's not bad. That's wonderful. It was
really amazing for me and her, So he's making connections. He's making these connections.
You picked up. And that meant a lot to her.
I picked up, yes. Oh my God, it's Kwame.
But that happens a lot.
So Wednesday, I'm going to have a conversation with Jackie Woodson and Hope Anita Smith about poetry and writing in verse. And I can't wait. I love speaking with both of them. But Kwame, in her new book, which is coming out November 10th, it's this week. I think it's coming out this upcoming week on the 3rd. Remember Us, which is a beautiful, beautiful story about growing up in Bushwick. But she does a beautiful acknowledgement and shout out to you and Jason at the beginning of that book. All of you crafting these beautiful stories in verse, and some of the stories that you write in verse. Can you talk about that? What is it? Is it a different process? Is it just a natural process for you? Is just the language you speak?
Yeah, it's the language I speak. I've written one prose novel. It's my first novel. It was horrible. Don't Google it.
Now I'm gonna Google it.
Lisa, don't you dare. But when I was learning how to write a novel in verse, I read Out of the Dust.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with this book. Yes.
Incredible. Just like, wow, how'd you do that? Read Ann Berg's All the Broken Pieces, about baseball, Skylar, in Vietnam. Incredible. And then read Hope Anita Smith's books, The Way a Door Closes and Keeping the Night Watch, and was like floored because it's like 40 pages each book. How did she tell a whole story in 40 pages? And it's poems. It's concise, rhythmic language and all this white space. It's like, how did this happen? And so I remember the first draft of the crossover was 50 pages. And I thought I had done something. And I was sitting out the publishers and they were like, you ain't do nothing. You know, you're gonna have to. So I hadn't figured out how to do it in such a short amount of time, but it's all I know how to do. It's what I've read, it's what I've learned, it's what I've been taught, it's what I've studied, it's what I've done 17 times now. And it's the language I learned from my mother, who taught me Lucille Clifton and Nikki Giovanni and Langston Hughes and Ernest Gregg and Dr. Seuss, Fox and Socks, at age 3. So it's my mother's. That was the language I learned to speak and listen and read and write.
How do kids respond to that? I mean, you obviously have connections to your readers in special ways. Are there moments where you can remember where a kid came back to you about maybe with their own poem, or they came back to you about it being in verse and what that meant to them?
I mean, the short answer is yes. I have a career today because young people love poetry. Like, my career was made because young people got it, even though their teachers and librarians at first didn't necessarily get it. And the teachers and the librarians, the adults in their life, didn't necessarily get it, because when we look back on our childhood, y'all, how were we taught poetry in 6th, 7th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade? It was staid, incomprehensible, boring. Nobody wanted to do it. Like, how do you go from Shel Silverstein in 5th grade to Shakespeare in 9th grade? That's like a huge leap.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to write books that are a bridge, that are a bridge to helping young people appreciate literature. Because when we think about what poetry does, it builds confidence. You get through it immediately. It's one page, it's a haiku, it's 3 lines. It's a list poem, it's 10. It's quick. You get through it, you build confidence in the reader. 2, it triggers your voice. Like, each poem has a voice that makes you feel something. It's so short and concise. It's all this white space. Padma likes to say that the white space is for the spiritual journey that the reader's going to take. They don't even know they're taking it, but they're filling in the blanks, because it's not just the words that are on the page, it's the words that aren't being said. So I find that young people got it, which is why I'm here today, and they still get it. And eventually the librarians and the teachers caught up, which is kind of cool too.
They always end up catching up, you know. That's the hard thing. I mean, like, whether it be without our graphic novels, there's so many things where there's you know, but eventually they get there. There's so many different ways of being able to reach different kids, and you never know what the book is that's going to open the door for them to that world of reading. I'm curious. I've said this on other recordings that I've done, where my book that opened the door for me was Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls, a book where the author wanted to, like, I think he actually threw it in the trash, and his wife found it and sent it into a publisher. He didn't even think it would become something, but I remember my 5th grade teachers reading it out loud in the classroom, and the power that had of everybody sort of seeing each other's emotions while the book was being read aloud. Can each of you remember a book that had that kind of door opening experience for you into the world of literature? You know, you read as a picture books, but it's different when you finally find that story that takes you to another place.
I remember reading the Katie John books. I don't know if they're still in print by Mary Calhoun, about a young girl, maybe 9 or 10, who was a misunderstood tomboy. And I was like, that's me. I'm a misunderstood tomboy. It didn't matter that she was white and living in the Midwest and I was Chinese living in LA. I identified with her, and I told myself that when I had a daughter and I was determined I was going to have a daughter, I was going to name her Katie after Katie John. And I have a daughter named Katie, who calls herself Kate. But I identified with that book so much, and I wrote an article about it for the Hornbook magazine about the books and about Mary Calhoun. And because I had thought that she had probably passed away, because when I was a kid, I thought that all authors were dead people. And she had read the article and contacted me, and we became pen pals.
No.
That's
And we
awesome.
finally got to meet in person one day. And when I was in LA, and I took the train up and I visited her, and it was so nerdy and wonderful. We went to the library together.
Oh, wow.
And then we did that thing that I think that probably we all do, or at least you could just tell me that you do it too. You go and you look to see if your book's on the shelf. And then right. And then if they are on the shelf, you're like, oh, nobody's checking them out. And if they're not, you're like, why aren't they on the shelf? But anyway, the Katie John books for me, they were some of the books that made me want to become an author.
I think mine was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. Number one, it was a book that I read in 7th grade back in the day when it was not required reading in 7th grade. So my best friend came to school one day with a beat up paperback copy of this book, and she had read it and she loved it, and she passed it on to me, and I loved it. And as an adult, when I, in hindsight, I think the things that appeal to me about it, and that still appeal to me, and I think appeal to a lot of kids, is that it's a book about outsiders. It's a book about the kids who, don't quite belong. And Pony Boy is this protagonist that looks one way on the outside, but is a completely different person on the inside, has this very rich internal life. And I always felt that way. Like my insides didn't match my outsides, or what people expected when they looked at me, expected me to be like. And talk about the power of poetry. It's Robert Frost's "Nature's First Green is Gold" has burned in my brain from the time I read it in 7th grade. And I did a school visit once with a group of 7th graders, and they had just read. I was talking about the books that that I loved growing up, and they had just read The Outsiders, and I mentioned that it was the only poem it was one of 2 poems that I had memorized. And so somebody told me to recite it. And so I started reciting it, and this auditorium full of 7th graders started reciting with me. So yeah, so it's powerful book, and the power of poetry right there. And I read it every few years. And I think, like Lisa said, I'm not a white boy from Oklahoma in the 1950s, but the heart of that story is very much mine.
I've never read The Outsiders. Now I feel like I should. My book that really broke open. This is going to be the most horrible, nerdy, snobby response ever, and I'm so sorry. But I don't know how old I was, maybe 10, 11. But a friend's mom was a writer too, and for my birthday one year, she gave me 2 books. She gave me Jane Eyre and Rebecca, like together, and there was something just like. It just was like, whoa, there's this whole other like literary world out there full of like very scary houses where there's lots of danger and they're filled with ghosts and like murder. And I don't know, I had a very like, I was really, really into ghost stories, and I had sort of gone through all those, the scary stories to tell in the dark book and stuff like that. And I was all primed for something really kind of explosive and terrifying. And those books, I don't know, they were just like, it was like someone, gave me a key to a door, and like all like in the Wizard of Oz, when she opens it up and then everything's in color. It was like that, except everything was like really dark and rainy and like lightning bolts and stuff, which was where I wanted to be at that age. So that's my nerdy answer to that. So.
That's a good one.
That was so snobby and horrible. And
I know.
oh my gosh, how dare you? So my father was a book publisher and a distributor. So I worked for him as a child, and I had, to read the books. I mean, I read mostly the jackets because I didn't feel like reading the whole books. Two books that come to mind are Alice Walker's The Temple of My Familiar, which has stuck with me all these years. I still read it pretty regularly. And it stuck with me because the husband and the wife in the book, her bedroom's over here, his bedroom's over here, and they have a room in the middle where they meet when they want to see each other. And I always thought that was so cool. As a teenager reading, I was like, yes! They had the best marriage ever, I think. And the second book was a book that Heinemann used to publish the African Writers series back in the 80s. And they published all the African writers, Chinua Achebe, Wally Soyinka, Peter Abrams. And so one of the books that we sold was a book called The Healers by a Ghanaian author, a novelist named Ayikwe Armah. And it was about the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, from the perspective of Ghanaians. Okay? In pre-colonial Black Africa. And so about the slave trade. And so there's this one scene where the Africans are invited by the Europeans to come and attend a party on the ship. We're gonna have liquor, we're gonna have all this stuff. And so the Africans are excited and they're on the ship and they're given swag. It wasn't called swag back then, but they're giving swag, and one of the swag is they're giving gold bracelets. And of course the gold bracelets are chains. And I thought, like as a teen, that blew my mind. And those two books have always stuck with me, and I knew like one day, if I ever write, I want to be able to sort of elicit that type of emotion.
Yeah, and you do, all of you do. As we come towards the end of our conversations and our talks, I wanted to ask you, Kwame, about, because I saw on social media, because I'm friends with Jerry Craft, both of you spent time in Africa, and I know you've done a lot there, where you've gone back and you take authors, you yourself go and you meet kids and middle school kids too that are there, and provide them with books, and there's schools. And so can you talk about that?
I mean, yeah, I visited West Africa and East Africa a number of times, and it's just a part of my mission to surprise kids, to be able to bring the words off the page and put them on the stage, to make the words come alive, to do what my mom and dad did for me for as many kids as I can. And so wherever that is, whether it's in Washington, D.C. or it's in Nairobi, Kenya, like I don't see a whole lot of boundaries. And it's also a little selfish because whenever I visit other places, other communities, other cultures, I become even more inspired. And my worldview begins to expand and creates more opportunities for me to dream up and imagine new stories to tell. I will say that when we were in Kenya this past summer, all the kids knew who I was, but none of them knew who Jerry was. So yeah. That's just to show you all that I'm more important than Jerry. That's my point. No, this has been great.
No, but what you are, Kwame, is a role model for a lot of other authors about how to share the world with your readers. I think like for someone like Skylar who's just starting out, like you've got some secret surprise visits to plan out, Skylar, for for your kid fans. And Celia, and you're gonna have to do some road trips to New Mexico and surprise some kids. I think that would be great. Um, Lisa, I have to say to you too, you have upped your social media game in the last couple months. Like I'm seeing like reels come from you and
People
these
are like,
fun
"You
videos.
gotta do TikTok, you gotta do these videos." I'm like, "No, I don't wanna do it." And you know what? They're really fun. I mean, and they're fast.
Yeah, but they're you, and that's what I love. I love that they are you. I love your space behind you, that you have the things that are from your past and your present, and that they mean something to you. Not everybody may know what they mean, but they're
Colin
yours, right?
Firth. Yeah, okay.
Colin Firth, yeah, Colin Firth, right? I love that you, all four of you, are you, and that you put you into the stories that you write. And that heart and that soul comes through to the readers, whether they are adults like many of us who are watching now, or the kids that read the books for the first time and find their door opening because of that. So, oh, someone's asking Lisa where Bud is. Bud is
There he
always
is.
around.
There's Bud the bear. He's in Maisie Chan's Last Chance, and he goes missing.
Yeah.
But we found him. Here he is.
Yeah, and he's always hiding in Lisa's photos on your beautiful walks. Thank you, everybody. Are there any last words? Does anyone have any last words about anything to send out to all of our audience today?
Just thank you for hosting us and for the Judy Lopez Memorial Award. So much appreciated.
Absolutely. Well, we loved being able to talk with all of you, and we look forward to. Oh, actually, let's just do that as the last thing. Lisa, you've got a book coming out with Dan Santat. So, do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah.
The
Okay.
Misfits.
I'm trying to take this down, but the wall might fall. So it's the Misfits. It's a middle grade mystery adventure series about 5 very awkward kids who become secret undercover operatives and solve crimes.
Yeah. That's a perfect buddy to write a book with. So
Yes.
it's gonna be awesome. Celia, do you have something coming up?
I don't.
Okay.
I know. I'm just here twiddling my thumbs.
I'm sure not. Well, we're excited to find out what the next thing will be when it happens. Skylar, yeah, I heard you said you're working on a YA, maybe?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a Victorian Gothic murder mystery that is.
Hello, Rebecca and Jane Eyre.
Yeah, I'm very close to the end. It's been a long and arduous journey, so hopefully it'll be creepy and good and mysterious. We'll see.
And Kwame, we're getting you to your deadline.
I got a book due on Tuesday, y'all. I can't be on here all night hanging out with y'all.
All right, that's it then. That is the final goodbye. Thank you all. It has been wonderful talking to all of you, and we look forward to reading your new books soon.
Thank you for this honor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.